I never imagined how much a part of the culture fishing for one species could be until I moved to Alabama. But yeah, red snapper is on everybody's mind.
It's hard for people in the rest of the Gulf, or definitely the nation, to understand how important red snapper is in Alabama and the Florida Panhandle as well.
Almost as important as Alabama football, but not quite.
I'm Melissa Hall, and you're listening to Gravy.
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 A production of the Southern Foodways Alliance, Gravy tells the stories of the changing American South. Fishing is a big deal in the Gulf of Mexico. On a pretty day, you'll see boats loading and unloading at every dock. Roadsides will be congested with boat trailers. You might even happen upon a fishing rodeo. For tourists and devoted local anglers alike, one fish rises above the rest on the Gulf. One fish to rule them all. The red snapper. Reporter Irina Zhorov delves into why this species has become such a desirable catch.
For cultivating progress across the South, for working to unconditionally improve the lives of all, and for the bold underwriting of every Gravy podcast, SFA thanks our visionary Louisville, Kentucky friends, Pam and Brooke Smith.
At 6 a.m. on a steamy July morning, the crew of the 62-foot Gulf Rebel is bustling. An extended family from Arkansas has booked a half-day fishing trip on this family-run charter boat based in Orange Beach, Alabama. When they arrive, First Mate Second Captain Phil Annan ushers them into the cabin for a debrief.
All right, good morning. All the life jackets are under the seats here.
Phil says the Gulf is calm in July, but
if you do happen to get seasick, we ask you to get seasick outside. Please and thank you. Mom will be mad.
The family is two sisters, Julie Barnett and Susan Coughlin. Their mom, their respective husbands, and the 5 kids they have between them, all 10 and under. They come from Little Rock to the Gulf every year for vacation. Most years they go fishing. Julie estimates this is their 10th trip.
All of us love fishing, and then all of us love a little friendly competition. That never hurts. And it's just a good activity to get everybody out and about. You know, you can only do the beach so many days, and so they all love it.
Tommy Coughlin, Susan's husband, booked the trip.
So what are we fishing for today?
Our main target is red snapper.
The family settles in for the 2-hour ride to the first fishing spot, some 25 miles offshore. And I climb up to the wheelhouse where Captain Brian Annan, Phil's dad, is steering the boat south-southwest. Brian says it's been a busy summer. Lots of corporate trips, families, bachelor parties.
They want good weather, the summertime, warm weather, calm seas, and of course, snapper.
Since moving to South Alabama a couple of years ago, I've been seeing red snapper on restaurant menus, on billboards, t-shirts, everywhere. Why, I ask Brian, this obsession with red snapper in Alabama?
It's like going out to Oklahoma and say, why beef?
Let's zoom out for a moment. The Gulf of Mexico is a fisherman's paradise. Tuna, amberjacks, mahi, swordfish, it's all here. There's a commercial fishery here worth nearly $1 billion annually. And the Gulf has the highest level of spending by recreational anglers, which includes charter trips in the whole country. More than $5 billion annually. Where does snapper fit in?
Snapper is definitely one of the most targeted fish species in the Gulf of Mexico, in all states. Snapper's its own season, especially down here for charter guys and private rec guys. You have hunting season, you have football season, you have snapper season.
This is Kesley Banks, a fisheries ecologist at the Hart Research Institute at Texas A&M Corpus Christi. She says there are 2 main red snapper populations. One lives in the South Atlantic, from North Carolina to Florida. The other in the Gulf. For the Gulf population, the basics are this.
So red snapper are kind of a bottom-dwelling fish. They are red,
shimmering ruby red. They can live to be 50 years old. When they're older and bigger and have moved up the food chain, they can live in the water column. But when they're younger,
the younger fish tend to be structure-oriented.
They like to live on or around rocks or reefs, something that might protect them from predators. And because of that, they're easy to find. If you know where the structure is, you know where the snapper is.
I think just being able to almost guarantee you're going to go get one now seems to really have ingrained red snapper in the public eye.
And it's not just that they're findable. They're fun to catch. Big, pretty, and
they can be aggressive hunters, especially when you're fishing for them. They put up a really good fight because they hit the line pretty hard.
They're also delicious. At local restaurants, you can get snapper fried, blackened, grilled. Some places serve up snapper throats, which are juicy and look dramatic on a plate.
They're kind of a white, flaky fish that goes good with about any dish.
So good fighters, but guaranteed tasty dinner? That's perfect for someone that might go offshore fishing just once a year, like the Arkansas family. Or even regular fishers who just didn't have luck hooking one of the migratory species, like mahi-mahi. And it's perfect for charter boat captains too, because it means their customers always walk away with the fish. But this love of snapper has had consequences. After the first real U.S. fisheries management law was passed in 1976, government scientists tried to figure out how the population was doing.
When the first stock assessment came out in the 1980s on red snapper, they were found to be undergoing overfishing and to be overfished, meaning we are pulling out too many fish currently, and we had already pulled out too many fish for that stock to be sustainable. And so that kind of sparked the management of red snapper.
From the start, that management has been controversial and complex. All of a sudden, federal officials were telling locals a species they'd fished since the 1800s had catch limits or seasons. And the population didn't seem to be rebounding with the restrictions either. Seasons for recreational fishers got shorter and shorter.
And so the shortest of those seasons happened in 2017 in the Gulf of Mexico, which was 3 days. And that kind of piqued Congress's interest, particularly Senator Shelby out of Alabama, who just took that as his cause. And this was an issue. Anglers who own the fish should have a right to access those fish.
That's right. Alabama stepped forward to fight for their snapper.
I'm from New Orleans, so I grew up on the Gulf. But red snapper is not that important in Louisiana. It is really an Alabama to Florida panhandle thing. And it's like a fundamental human right for them to be able to go harvest red snapper.
This is Sean Powers, director of the School of Marine and Environmental Sciences at the University of South Alabama. Mark Albans is a research assistant professor at the school.
Everybody's worried about this. Everybody's concerned about it. When the numbers go down or when the regulations get tighter, everybody's talking about it. I mean, it's a conversation that's happening in probably 90% of households in Mobile, Alabama, when something is going on with the fisheries.
Sean says there's a reason Alabama anglers in particular are so focused on snapper. The Gulf floor off the coast of Alabama is naturally flat and muddy for a long ways out to sea. Doesn't have much structure for red snapper. Remember, juvenile snapper like structure, like reefs. But starting in the 1950s and ramping up in the 1980s, the state of Alabama and individual Alabamians started building artificial reefs in the Gulf. They dump car hulls, military cargo ships, tanks, planes, cement debris. Yep, on purpose.
We have found things like voting machines, washers and dryers chained together, a 72 Caprice Classic.
All of this stuff would go in water up to 200, sometimes 300 feet deep to make artificial structures for the fish. These days, there are rules in place for what can be deployed, and companies dedicated to building artificial reefs. Settlement money from the BP oil spill has poured in to amplify the state's building efforts. Sean estimates that even as many early reefs have disintegrated and disappeared, There are currently about 14,000 structures off Alabama today. Along with the fishing regulations, the artificial structures seem to be helping the fish population recover. This is Mark.
By providing structure and refuge for those fish during that time, you're increasing their probability of survival to an older age.
The structures are also making the fish more findable. And with easy findability comes more demand. Anglers are clamoring for their snapper. Sean again.
I think a lot of it is the artificial reefs, the fact that it's relatively close to shore, so people even in a very modest-sized boat, if it's a calm day, can go out there.
Alabama controls just about 6% of Gulf Coast, but nearly a third of red snapper harvested by recreational anglers in the Gulf are caught in its waters. Other states have artificial reef programs too, but Alabama has, by far, the largest artificial reef zone, the area offshore where reef placement is allowed. And the Alabama program has another novel feature. While in most places the state or local government takes responsibility for building reefs, in Alabama, anybody can drop a reef. It costs just $33 to get a permit.
About 20% of that 14,000 are things the state has put out there, but 80% are private recreational anglers or charter boat anglers who put structures out there.
In other words, individuals are doing most of the reef building. One of those people is Brian Annan, the captain of the Gulf Rebel, who we met earlier.
How does Captain Annan know where to find the snapper? And will the family from Arkansas ever catch one? Find out after the break. But first,
Maker's Mark bourbon is aged to taste in Loretto, Kentucky. The Samuels family uses locally grown, soft red winter wheat and sources water from a lake on the distillery's campus. Every Maker's Mark label is printed and die-cut by hand on an antique press, and each bottle is hand-dipped in their signature red wax. All the details matter when distilling quality bourbon. Since Maker's Mark sold its first case of bourbon to the Keeneland Racecourse in Lexington, they have perfected the craft of distilling American whiskey. For their dedication to making great bourbon and for their support of the Southern Foodways Alliance, we thank them. Maker's Mark crafts their bourbon carefully. Please enjoy it that way.
join SFA in Raleigh, North Carolina, October 27th and 28th for our fall symposium. We'll tell stories of the people who power our restaurants, asking who serves the restaurant and whom does the restaurant serve. Visit us at southernfoodways.org to buy your tickets and to learn more about the symposium.
I had visited Brian Annan back in the spring, before snapper season opened. Several cats patrolled his property in Orange Beach on a little cove.
What is this?
That's Batman. Yeah, he likes fish. He says, yeah, they inspect the catch when it comes in. That's Batman and Pepper.
I bet these cats eat real good.
And that's Roxy.
The place was also littered with retired commercial chicken cages. He buys artificial reefs, 8 or 15-foot cement and limestone pyramids that are deployed for him by the manufacturer. But he also puts out reefs himself, mostly those cages. He's designed a rig he can install on one of his boats in under an hour to load the cages and then roll them off into the sea. 4 cages were already loaded up and waiting to go.
Next 2 days is rough, then we should have a little stretch, pretty weather.
In total, he dropped 50 to 60 reefs during this year's off-season. And his reef's location is his own secret. While the state shares coordinates for the reefs it builds, so the public can fish them, Brian logs his personal reefs in a little notebook that's for his eyes only.
We ask all the passengers to surrender their cell phones prior to getting to our fishing reefs, probably, an hour or so before we get to any of our locations. They have to give up any electronic device.
On a busy summer day, as boats circle public reefs like sharks, he motors over to his own out-of-the-way reef and drops a line. Sometimes they get discovered, but he just checks his little notebook for another one. He sees the work of reef building as farming.
We plant it every year. Reefs will gradually deteriorate, and you got to plant, to harvest. And that's just the way I was raised, so we still plant today. Every year we plant. I was always taught the people that plant are the people that eat.
Would you have a business if artificial reefs were not a thing?
No, we wouldn't have no business. We wouldn't have no fishery. Not in Alabama.
But with the reefs, bonanza.
It's a good feeling, especially when they're in good, when they do good, and the reefs are in good shape, and the fisheries, and you see the fish come up under the boat. We've pulled up on a lot of spots and kind of wind up 2 or 3 fish, and 30, 40 snapper come up under the boat. And we just throw out handfuls of bait, and a lot of people just get mesmerized. They sit there and watch them swim under like an aquarium.
So that's why Alabamians care so much about the snapper. Many, like Brian, have spent considerable money and effort to build the reefs that have grown the fishing industry here. Others have become accustomed to being able to look at a map of public reefs and take the kids out fishing for a day. Since that 3-day snapper season in 2017, when Senator Shelby brought the plight of the snapper, or more accurately, the plight of the angler, to Congress, various changes have been implemented. Private recreational snapper seasons are now managed by states, not the feds, giving local authorities more decision-making power. Charters are still managed by the feds. Boat seasons now last months in the summer. Also, Congress funded a novel study to figure out how many snapper are actually in the Gulf. The $12 million Great Red Snapper Count, as the study was called, was released in 2021. Scientists found that there were 118 million red snapper in the Gulf, 3 times more than previous federal estimates. Anglers cheered, but the feds still have to do their own analysis. And Kesley Banks says the most recent analysis, called the stock assessment, didn't go well. It wrapped January 2024.
As of right now, we have a failed stock assessment for red snapper because there were 2,900 parameters put in that stock assessment model. It's just so many different data streams coming in to try to manage this fishery. It is one that we've made overly complex to manage. It's controversial. I mean, there's fights between the rec fishery and the commercial fishery about who owns the fish and who gets to fish it. There's NGOs that don't think we should be able to touch our fishery. It's just one of those very controversial species.
Despite all that, the Gulf snappers seem to be doing pretty well. They're no longer considered overfished. They're in a rebuilding phase. Anglers are out fishing. Back on the Gulf Rebel, the Arkansas family you met at the beginning is waking from their naps. Phil Annan is busy with preparations. He cooks up deer sausage and a green egg, rigs up the rods, and sets out buckets of cigar minnows, which will serve as bait. I ask him if he knows which reefs we'll go to, and he says his dad, Captain Brian, will look at his book and see which ones they haven't visited in a while. They don't like to overfish any one reef. I wonder out loud if Brian might show me his logbook of reefs, and Phil looks somewhat stricken by my audacity.
He won't even show me his book.
Oh, really?
Maybe one day. Yeah, he's got a few books. It's kind of like Nick Saban with his playbook. It's spent his entire life sinking and building this industry, so he keeps it close to his chest.
Eventually, the Gulf Rebel starts to slow, and Phil issues fishing instructions to the family. They're to count to 8 as they cast. Daniel Barnett and his 7-year-old son Patrick drop their first line.
Yeah. All right, so here we're gonna go. We're gonna put this, okay? Ready? Here we go. Count to 8.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Okay. Boom. Okay, you ready?
They wait a minute and feel a tug, but when they reel it in, there's nothing. Patrick's brother Bradley, though, has been luckier.
What is that?
That'd be a red snapper.
Can I see it? Jack caught a red snapper, baby.
Forward, baby.
Oh, yeah.
A couple more fish come in, but they're under the 16-inch size requirement.
All right, so he's under. Yeah, I'm going to release this one.
Phil meticulously measures fish and repeatedly counts the catch to make sure they haven't caught their limit. He's also energetically baiting hooks and fixing reels to keep the family fishing. After about 15 minutes, Phil tells everyone to reel it in, and Brian sets off for another reef. I ask Julie if she knows about the artificial reefs.
I know nothing about it. Nothing.
I don't know what's stranger, the idea of stopping at seemingly random spots in wide open water and somehow finding fish each time, or knowing that the spots are artificial reefs, small human-made environments built for a fish. The next stop is more active.
Yeah, I think it was. Oh!
Okay, hold on.
Go, go, go. Hurry.
Where are we going?
Go.
1, 2, 3, 4.
About 8 seconds.
And they're off.
Oh, my.
Oh, God.
Oh, my gosh. Holy moly. I caught the biggest one. No, I caught bigger than her. No, you did not.
Phil chases the yelps, helping unhook fish. The parents look unsatisfied.
When we had that first drop and not everybody got one, I told the dads, I go, we are going to need to make sure every kid catches a fish, because otherwise it's just a huge competition. But no, they're all in their little happy place. All is good. They've all caught big fish. Of course, every single one of them says they caught the biggest.
We visit 4 of Brian's secret reefs that day. In no time at all, they've caught their limit, 2 snappers per person. On the ride back to shore, the kids keep opening the coolers, admiring their catch and the views.
I mean, look at this. This is awesome. Well, I'm just looking at the ocean right now, and yeah, the rods, and it's just so crazy. Yeah, it's so crazy how we get to have this experience. So I'm just super excited to have that adventure. Amen. 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 Amen.
At the dock, Phil cleans the nearly 24 fish with quick, expert knife work. The parents drink a beer. The kids feed fish skins to the fish by the dock, drink water out of a hose, and take turns posing with the biggest snappers. The family will take their fillets to a local restaurant to cook up for them. It's unclear what next year's snapper season will look like, but for now, this is a scene I imagine playing out on commercial and private docks all around us, ingraining itself into the soft brain matter of young people who will inevitably grow and one day take to the water with their own kids, attempting to recreate the memory. It's a scene, in other words, of how snapper becomes beloved. Thank you to Captains Brian and Phil Annan for letting me join a trip, and the Barnett and Coughlin families for allowing me to crash their vacation.
Irina Zhorov reported and produced this episode. A frequent Gravy contributor and published novelist, Zhorov regularly works in both print and audio. Her reporting interests include mining, food and agriculture, environmental, and land stories. We thank Wendell Patrick for Gravy's theme music. We also owe a huge thank you to Clay Jones and Broadcast Studios for recording and mixing Gravy. Managing editor for Gravy and all other SFA media is Sarah Camp Milam. Olivia Terenzio is our podcast editor. Fact-checking comes courtesy of Heather Cole. Mary Beth Lassiter is our publisher. Visit us at southernfoodways.org to learn more about our work. And while you're there, watch a film, listen to an oral history, read an article from our sister publication, Gravy Journal, or make a donation. Because your dollars fund our work and help us make more gravy. If you enjoyed this episode, tell a friend. There's plenty of gravy to go around.